Field trip. Um, the one of the things that we have to make sure of is that as we do a classroom management presentation, that there are certain students that no matter what you would like them to do in the greatest classroom that you could possibly create, they may not be able to do that because of a disability. Um, let's share this and hope that it works the first time. Does it? Somebody want to nod their heads or give me a thumbs up that it's working? Do you see it? Yeah, good. Okay. What better way to get affirmation than people nodding their heads when you talk, right? Then you know that they understand. Okay. So let's look at classroom management. Yes, again, when we're talking about no matter what you do, we have to figure out, are there things that's part of an individual's disability that will prevent them um, from doing what you would like them to do? And I put EBD because we're going to be talking about behavior as a shared responsibility, but we're also going to talk about academics. There are students who cannot do the kind of work that you would like them to do because of disabilities that they might have, that cognitive disabilities that will prevent them from learning. So we kind of went over that last week. Any questions or concerns about that? You had a chance to think about it. A couple of you wrote me some very interesting notes on the side about it, and I really appreciated that. Um, and I think I've gotten those back out to you, those notes. So before I start putting the bean bags on the floor and the flowers in the corner of the room and all of that other stuff that have a fabulous looking classroom, the posters, I look at these six things, okay? I look at six parts of classroom. So for me, when I do a classroom management, no matter what, I will sit down with a teacher and we'll talk about philosophy. And when I mean philosophy, probably the most boring question one could ask a teacher to be, because you really don't think that you have a philosophy yet. You don't think, well, all children are special or everyone could succeed and all that nonsense. It's not nonsense, but it's not really a philosophy. It's how am I going, what do I know about myself that's going to direct me to be a good teacher? Okay. What do I know about myself? Am I consistent or do I let things go? Am I comfortable, you know, am I comfortable watching everything at all moments? How much time do I really not aspire to spend on developing a lesson? How much time do I develop a lesson and what kinds of things go in it? What do I know about myself? Will I go back and look at previous classes that I've had so I'd be able to chunk some fabulous lessons together? Do I really believe that a kid with a behavioral disability can control himself so that I should be able to figure out ways to help him manage that classroom? Or do I believe that the kid is evil and should be thrown out of class, maybe out of school? I mean, really inside, what do I believe? You know? Or they try to put one over on me because they have a disability. When I was a kid, we respected our teachers. We would never do that. Being as old as I am, I will tell you that I would sit in these kinds of faculty meetings, and almost every year or every 5 years, someone would say, our students just aren't as bright as they used to be. They're not as prepared as they used to be. You know, a faculty member would stand up and say that. If anyone took any data from when I first started teaching, all of you would have an IQ of 11 by now, if that was true. If everybody was less prepared than they were, less prepared they were, less prepared they were, less prepared, you probably couldn't even talk or read. Okay. It's our perception and our personal experience that guides it. And because we come here, we have certain kinds of headset, and that kind of makes up who we are. Um, I'm going to speak to that more specifically later. We're going to talk about people stuff. We're going to talk about the physical arrangement of your setting. We're going to talk about managing time. managing instructional activities. And then look last, managing student behaviors. And I will tell you, every time I was called into a school to work with teachers on classroom management, the first thing they wanted to talk about was managing student behaviors. The first thing. I'm going to let you know, you get the first 5 stuff done pretty well. The amount of inappropriate behaviors you're going to get in your classroom are going to be almost nothing. You don't do the first 5 things, you're going to have trouble the first minute you're in there. If it's chaos, it's chaos. My philosophy, now included, it's amazing that you have the same philosophy no matter how and who you teach, no matter what audience that you have. I've spoken in front of groups of like 5,000, and my philosophy there was the same as it is now in this setting. When I taught kids, what I wanted them to hear was, I want you to be in this classroom for as long as possible. The reason why I want your faces there on that screen is not for any punitive measure. It's going to up the chances that you're paying attention. Not guarantee it. You can be watching movies on the screen right next to it. I'm not an idiot, you know? But it's going to up the chances that you're here. And that's what I have to go on. I've got to figure out a way that I'm going to be able to capture you here. And I'm going to make this a good place to be. So when I want you in the classroom, my classroom in school as much as possible, I have to figure out all the kinds of factors that are to play with that. I got to be really good at creating lessons. I got to be really good at knowing who you are, what kinds of things you react to, what you don't react to. I got to know what works and what doesn't work. And I'll learn that as we go on. One of the ways I learned that, by the way, as you'll see later on, is I'll ask you. I'll talk to you, find out which ways works for you, which doesn't. I'll observe. I'll take data. I take data in here. In special ed, and this isn't on the table of many of you, okay? We often talk about teaching kids to learn in a structured way. We say, your classroom should be very structured. By teaching in a classroom where kids who misbehave quite a bit, in a poor environment, whether it's rural or urban. I always hear principals, and I always hear behavioral experts say, you need to make sure your classroom is structured. Make sure they know what's expected of them. Make sure you have rules, and make sure you have consequences, and make sure that those rules and consequences are consistently and continually applied. And many of you are saying to yourselves, yeah, that works for me when I feel comfortable with that. You know? Why do you think I have all of these different kinds of emails I send out and all that? Because some of you respond to that really well. Others of you blow it off. That's great. The ones who respond to it, you get extra. Yeah. That's a structured environment. Not very Socratic, it's not very, it's a lot of our postmodernist friends would say, wow, that's really not the way I would want to go. Learning should be free and open, and I want to explore who I am and where we go. And yeah. Where you go is where you're going to be, Both are important, and both kinds of kids learn it that way, just different, they respond to it differently. That's what you got to be aware of. And more critically, if you find yourself in a classroom of chaos next year, that the classroom is really bonzo, kids are acting inappropriate, kids are everywhere in every way. You might have observed in such a setting. You might be student teaching in such a setting now, those of you in AUSL. You might have those settings in your classroom. Yeah, it's important to start out with some kind of structure. But the next step is to teach them how to live without that structure. Because the world that we have out there is not structured, folks. So when you teach them to handle you, you are teaching them to handle you. When they're teaching them to when you're teaching them to respond to how you teach, what goes on in your classroom, that's fabulous for probably 90% of the kids. The 10% of the kids who won't figure out the next teacher, they get into big trouble. So we have to teach them to handle an environment which isn't structured. So if I have them in September and it's Chaos City, and I decide I'm going to start with a pretty structured classroom. Everybody's going to know what they're doing, blah, 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 right? Right about now, February, March, I'm going to start preparing for next year. I'm going to start preparing for the teachers that don't teach with structure. I'm thinking of elementary school folks now. For those of you who are in high school, I've got to be able to recognize and validate for them the idea that my class is different than another class out there. And you can't pretend that other class out there doesn't exist. You know? I met with some students today during my office hours, like 4 different students of you. I'm stunned that most of the meetings I've been having this year with this group has nothing to do with this class. We're talking about navigating DePaul. Okay. That's stunning to me. That tells us we may not have enough structure. And that stuff shouldn't be happening. What I also want to do in my philosophy, there's only 3 for me. I got to prevent problems from occurring. I'm not interested. What do you do if a kid does that? It means I haven't prepared enough for the kid not to do that. You hear me? I tried to prevent problems from occurring. And there's a lot of really cool ways to do that. And you have to continually come up with new ways to do that too, by the way. Feel free to raise your hand as we go on this. And as you think about it, think about how you're navigating it right now. And you finished the module 5, many of you, most of you. Maybe think about how this might impact for your final project, the management aspect of it, what we're doing today. And I'm not asking you to respond to this on those projects. I'm asking you to do what you know and how you're going to use it. I want it to be useful for you. People stuff. Who am I as a teacher? My favorite is that I'm the center of the universe. That's who I am as a teacher. You know, I mean, this is my job as a teacher is to be the hub of the learning that goes on in this classroom. Unfortunately, for most people who think they're the center of the universe, there are others in your classroom who believe they're the center of the universe. And almost always, if you're teaching a class of students who are under the age of 40, they too think they're the center of the universe. I don't know much about astronomy, but I kind of know that you can't have all these centers of universes. The world does not revolve around everybody. That would create crazy. So we have to recognize that. We have to recognize that sometimes students will behave in such a manner that has nothing to do with you as a person. Okay. In fact, most often, it will have nothing to do with you as a person. It'll have something to do with what you did. Okay. It'll have something to do with a behavior. It'll have something to do with what you're teaching. It'll have something to do with what you're ignoring when you teach about that person. What you unintentionally did with that student. Okay. It will have something to do with your philosophy of how you're going to, how you interact with students. Am I intentionally inviting? Do I try to do things intentionally to connect with a kid, both cognitively and affectively? Or am I an unintentionally inviting teacher? Is that just the way I am? That, kids love me. You know? If you don't know how to get kids to love you in that way, there's a million different things that you could do that the most disinviting person in the world can learn how to make students like them. Truly. It's work though. Teachers' behavior, remain calm. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Easier said than done when a student tells you to go F yourself, when a student doesn't work when you tell them to work, when a student throws something down, how do I remain calm? How do I remain calm when a student clearly in my head is not respecting me? How do I manage that? Because once you're not calm, as I think we mentioned last week, they own you. Once they know they own you, they own you. And owning you is a lot more fun than not, frankly. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to own up to it because it kills time. It kills time. And if I'm in a setting that I'm not learning, that I don't want to learn, it's too difficult for me to learn, that whatever any of those things are, my next step would be, if I'm one of these guys, is to kill some time, divert attention from the task at hand and have some fun, or get myself thrown out of here. So people stuff is you. By the way, also other teachers that you might need to collaborate with. Parents that you might need to collaborate with, a bit lower. The paraprofessionals, SICAs in Chicago, that you need to work with. When I think of students, I think the biggest problem that we have with students is that we don't teach them how to accept rules. It's got nothing to do with, you're gonna hate me. How's that for a setup? If you have to create rules in your classroom, right? First day of school, I'm sure some teachers said to you, you're gonna, create your classroom rules, right? Somebody with appropriate hand-raising behavior, tell me, how are you going to set up your classroom rules when you go teach next year? Anyone had thought about that or have an idea what they're going to do now? How are you going to create, what things are you going to do to say, okay, here are these are the rules I want to have in my classroom. I imagine somebody somewhere around the line told you, yeah, you should have some rules in your classroom, right? How are you going to create them? Kyla?
Maybe writing them down and putting them somewhere where the students can see.
So you're saying that you'll create the rules and then just write them down and put them where students can see them? Am I repeating that correctly?
Yeah, we can create them together.
You could create them together. I hear that a lot. Create them together. Anything else? Anybody else? Deborah? How are you going to do the rules?
How are you going to do the rules? Well, we could do it in the form of like a questionnaire. Basically, like fill out the survey or questionnaire, then maybe.
I'm sorry, didn't hear part of that. How are you going to create the rules for your classroom?
I'm sorry, didn't hear part of that. I said we could do it in the form of a survey form.
Yeah, I still lost it. I'm sorry. I think you're also getting feedback in your.
I think you're also getting feedback in your. Okay. I said we could do it in form of a survey.
Oh, survey them. Okay, sure. You could do that to
Oh,
find out
survey
where
them.
they're going.
Okay, sure.
Andrea, what about you?
Similar to Deborah, I was
Andrea,
thinking,
what about you?
similar to Deborah. Similar to Zebra, I was thinking about providing a survey when it comes to assignments, but also already having a set rules based on like school policy.
Mhm.
So if the school already has certain rules that cannot be changed, having those be visible, but things within the classroom, such as like late assignments or maybe flexibility in like workspace area, having the students decide how they would want to manage that within the classroom.
Great. So you're saying that you'll have some hard and fast rules that, you can't break. So, some wise kid raises his hand and says, "Oh, I think we should be able to smoke in class." You can't say, "Well, no, you can't do that." I should be able to come in late whenever I want to, you can't do that. So you're not going to go through that kind of stuff with them. Hear that, everybody, because if that's your philosophy and you're going to say, let's make up all our rules together, you're going to waste about half of a class easily when students make up rules that they would really like to have maybe, but you can't allow them to have. And more importantly, you wouldn't enforce the rules that they may say, yes, well, that's might be a rule that, might make you happy, but I can't teach that way. Like that won't make me an effective teacher. Lindsay, then Matt.
Hi. So I do a classroom syllabus every year.
Mhm.
And what I do with the students is I'll go over the classroom syllabus with the classroom expectations, the rules, and then I'll have a portion where their parent has to sign and acknowledge it.
Uh-huh.
And then back.
That's great. I won't ask you a follow-up question on that, but here's a follow-up question I would ask me. I then would want to make sure every few weeks even, I would go back over that. Okay. That's like, it's like saying I taught you the rules the first day. I'm not saying you did this, Lindsay. That's why I'm not going down this road. I hear the rules. Now I want to go back every few weeks and see what are the rules again? What happens if you do this? And what's the consequence if you do that? And is it okay if, and you, by the way, you don't do this when they're misbehaving. Okay. The worst time to teach is during a crisis, is during a what people call learning experiences. Because I don't know about you, the last time I ever want to learn anything is when I'm doing it wrong. Okay, I really don't need a lecture. Not only did I do it wrong, now you're going to ask me what I have to do to make it right. My blood pressure's already up because you're making me, I'm embarrassed or you're punishing me or whatever's happening in your classroom. Why don't you wait till later after the consequence is given when I'm calmed down and you're calmed down? Well, think about it. When you get into an argument with your honey, isn't the best time to work that through is right in the middle of that argument? No, you almost always wait till you're all calm. And then you say, okay, well, now we could listen to each other. Same thing with kids. Matt?
We did in the classroom I student teach in, we did like a mix of a couple things people have been saying. We did a survey first, and then of like a couple, we call them classroom norms.
Okay, well,
Basically,
very fancy.
yeah. And then we had the students vote on their top, I think like 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about them, and then we wrote them on a poster that hangs in the classroom for the rest of the year.
Again, cool, as long as they fit within the confines of the rules of the school. And okay, if they're fit on the confines of your comfort level of teaching, because you certainly aren't going to be letting them do things that make you uncomfortable. Some teachers are comfortable with kids talking quietly with each other during class time, and others are not. Okay. So you have to make sure that they're rules that you're comfortable with. So that's all fine, as long as you don't have a hidden curriculum. And the hidden curriculum here is, no matter what, at the end of the day, the rules that we have are the rules I came in with. And all of this democracy crap was really just silly stuff that I'm having you think that you're part of when I knew from the beginning, here are my 5 rules. Okay? Then you're manipulative. And that's already, for some kids, especially the smart ones, they already know already, okay, he's full of it right now. We might give him another day, but right now he's manipulating us. He's telling us we have a voice when we really don't. Right? And you have to figure that out as you go through. It's real simple. And you know, basically I do what Lindsay did. You might have noticed my syllabus. Here are the rules. All right? I'm going to try many ways as I can to explain the rules. And why are those rules there? Because they allow me to teach as well as I possibly can, and hopefully allow you to learn the best way I can teach you. Okay? That's really the purpose of rules for me. So I can't learn very well. I can't teach very well if there's a lot of distractions in my room, in my classroom. Some teachers can. I cannot. I do. I have ADHD. No problem with it. So I start looking everywhere where everything's going on, and I have a hard time focusing because I'm paying attention to everything else. So that's my problem if I'm teaching. And I've got to be, in this case, I've got to be the hub. I got to be able to teach fairly well. Hopefully there's few of those. Most kids don't have a problem setting up rules, folks. Most kids have a problem accepting consequences. You could create the 5 greatest rules in the world, the 5 greatest consequences in the world, fair consequences to misbehavior. Kids don't have a problem. Then you turn around to the kids and say, here's my rules and here's my consequences. Does anyone have a problem with that? And they're all going to say, many of us, no. Except for when? When they broke the rules, when you're doing the consequence. Then you're unfair, all right? Then you're a favorite, then you're bad, then you're all this. So depending on the level of antisocial behavior, anti-school social behavior in my classroom, I will literally teach students how to accept responsibility, how to accept consequences, because it's not easy, folks. You don't like it. I'm going to guess that when you're at home or you're with your honey and your honey and you cook something really nice for your honey, and your honey said, this would be really good, but you really could have been much better if you did this and that and this. And I'm sure you're going to say, oh, thank you so much for that feedback. I know you're only doing it to make me a better cooker, right? I really appreciate that. How do you like how do you like the way I'm dressed? Oh, you look really good. You look much better than you did yesterday. I'll tell you that. You really can do it if you want to. Pain praise. Okay. We need to teach people that we need to understand, now that you're in the driver's seat, the teacher role, most kids who get thrown out of your classroom are not going to get thrown out of the classroom for what they did. They're going to get thrown out of the classroom because of your reaction to what they did because they're not going to say, when you say, Bobby, please sit down and pay attention, they're not going to say, oh, thank you, Miss Flores, for correcting me. That's going to make me such a good student now. I'll be whoever you want me to be. Thank you. I know you're only criticizing me because you want me to be good, because you want me to learn. They're going to be like we are. You criticize me, it's going to hurt. You criticize me, I'm going to get defensive. You criticize me, I'm going to deny it. They're not going to say, oh, thank you. Let's be realistic of what we expect from these students. And I'm talking about those of you who will be teaching, honor students. It's the same setup. So we teach this with kids. Depending on the grade and the classroom that you're in, we teach self-acceptance. We teach school social skills. We don't teach social skills. That's a misnomer. Whenever you hear about teaching social skills, we're talking about social skills that's going to allow a kid to handle the school day. Okay? We're not talking about social skills that's going to allow them to make friends outside the school. Hopefully they connect to it, but not always. You already got too much on your plate. We teach them problem solving, which fits into almost every one of your curricula. You could take people say, well, you're talking affective education here. You're talking what? I don't have time to do that. I'm going to teach high school math. I'm going to teach this. I don't have time for this. Give me 10 minutes with you. I will show you how your lessons can teach these things. Okay. And by the way, be more meaningful to your students. When I was dean, I was talking to chairs, and someone said, no one ever taught me to be a chair. I was a faculty member. First, I was a teacher. Now they're making me a boss. No one taught me to be a boss. No one taught you to boss. No one taught you to have the authority in your classroom with paraprofessionals. I'm going to guess. They're going to give you do's and don'ts, but they're not going to say, okay, today I want you to meet with your SICA, meet with your paraprofessional, and come up with what's going to happen this week with her or him. Because you, Blake, Shannon, you're responsible for what goes on in that classroom. You're responsible for everything that paraprofessional does. You're the cheese, And some of us didn't sign up for that. We have a hard enough time managing the students. Especially if I walk into a classroom where a SICA's been there for 90 years and it wants to tell me how to run the classroom. That should be fun, huh? You ready for that one? Well, the last teacher, you ran it this way. She didn't treat the kids this way. She, follow me, honey, and I'll show you. Oh, please shoot me. Right? Most of them are fabulous. The vast majority. I know there's some in here. We kind of talked about working with parents earlier. The idea basically is that they're here to give us information, hear information, and we work with that information. They're not there to run your curriculum. They're not there to run your classroom. You are. You are. In a collaborative way, yes, in a nice way, yes, and all those other kinds of things, but the ultimate responsibility is you. And you could be as big or as little or as quiet or as loud as you are as a human being and still do all of this stuff. You don't have to have a leadership personality. Because you want to be a teacher, you're already a leader. You're already a teacher. You got to get your head around that. A little bit of assertiveness, not aggressiveness, assertiveness, to let people know what you want to do. And what you want to do, folks, is backed up by research, is backed up by literature. It's not backed up by how you want to do it, okay? Why you want to do it that way. They won't listen to that, nor should they. They should listen to what we know works and what doesn't. Thoughts? Have you done the para yet, Richie? Rich, are you Richie or Rich?
I am Richie, and I'm trying to figure out how to use this quickly on my phone. Sorry.
Right, no,
I'm Richie.
I only need to know the first part. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when collaborating with paraprofessionals. I was a Sika for a while, and when we talk about like setting up expectations for students, um, I think one of the best things that was ever done for me was I only had one teacher do it, but they handed me the first day I walked into their classroom just like a short printout of the expectations of me according to like my job role, but also according to like what they expect in their room specifically, because Sikas are going into, you know, 3, 4, 5 different classrooms a
Yep.
day, following around students. And, you know, there are a lot of instances that occur where, you know, the expectations of one teacher is very different from the others. And then, you know, through the grapevine, you'll hear like a complaint that you weren't doing some sort of task that they expected of you. And it's like, you need to establish that with your paraprofessionals. It makes the relationship way better because, you know, we know what to expect of each other. We know what is going to be successful for us to be doing in your classroom. So giving us that outline is very helpful, giving them the outline.
Same outline for substitute teachers. You should have that for substitute teachers before you should be ready. You should have a certain kind of setup for them. Otherwise, the day is lost. I remember when I first started teaching in the high school, after I left teaching in the reform school, whenever I was out, my students would all get into major trouble. And they say, "Oh, we're so glad you're back. And, you know, you could handle these kids." And what they were really telling me was I was failing. They didn't mean to be. They thought they were being nice to me and complimenting me. But the real message was, you manage these kids and that's why they're okay. So you've taught them nothing. You have not taught them how to be in that classroom with you not being there. So you're failing. Now, personally, I don't mind failing. That's how I learn. I didn't think I was a failure because I failed, but that's what was going on with me. I said, wow, that sucks. My kids are in trouble. What kinds of things do I set up now so they don't get in trouble when I leave? You know, do I work closely with a para? Do I work closely with a sub? Do I create quote unquote, you know, incentives, contests for my students that they know that if they get a certain amount of whatever points or when I'm gone, you know, that doesn't get them thrown out of class, that doesn't have them causing trouble, then I'm a little better. Then I'm teaching them how to learn without structure. Or maybe I'm teaching them how to learn with a whole lot less structure. You know. Plan, 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 plan. That's what this is. That's what this is. This is notebooks. This is folders in your computer. This is all of the things that I said to you the first day. What makes sense to you, keep it, fold it, write it down. What doesn't. Your classroom now, what you teach, every part of that classroom has a purpose. Okay? If you have a classroom of really hyper, you know, active kids, don't have so much stimuli around. You know what I mean by stimuli? Don't have a lot of things around. You know, it might be beautiful for you that your classroom is now resembles a jungle, but anytime a kid is bored, that jungle's screaming, "Play with me." You know, look at me, fantasize about what's in that jungle. I taught a class. I don't remember what the class was. Some special ed class when I was at Central Michigan. And the class was in a science classroom. So this class had science and social studies. This classroom had terrariums and aquariums and all the and maps and globes, and it was like multi-sensory in every which way. So I would say to them, close your eyes. Tell me what's in this room. And they would tell me everything. Oh, there's an aquarium. What's in the aquarium? And they would say how many thises are in it, and how many that's are in it, and how many, you name it, they would tell me all these different things. And they would say, what's on the map? What maps are they? And they would tell me what countries and all the different things, every detail. And then I would pray that they had this class for someone else as well. You know why? Because if they knew all that stuff was going on in my class, it means when we were doing stuff, they were paying attention to all that other stuff. All right? And that's what we do when we're bored, right? When we're bored, anything in our purview, anything around us, anything in our sight, screams out, look at me. Screams out, play with me. All right? Screams out, do this with me. Because when I'm bored, that's what I want to. What do you think everyone's walking around with their damn phones all the time? I've got to do something about it. Play with me. Oh, I guess I have a phone to play with. It's really important that I'm on this for the 90th time in the last 6 seconds, right? So we do. We all do it. This is not an old man rant. This is what we do. When things are quiet, we attend. We watch things. This multitasking, research shows this no such, I mean, it's very little. Very few people can multitask on an effective level. Kendall.
Hi.
Hi.
You mentioned how students in that instance that you're discussing notice everything in the classroom around them. Couldn't that be used on the flip side of that coin of like it relates to everything that you're talking about? So if they are wondering and thinking and daydreaming, like it can still have purpose. I mean, I feel like it's not necessarily a bad thing to have stuff and posters and maps and books and things like that.
Absolutely. There was a guy named, and you don't need to know this guy's name, but his name was Cruikshank, and he worked with people with overactivity. And he said, have your room as crazy as you want, do whatever you want with it. But if you're teaching a group of kids, make sure behind you, there's nothing. If you want their attention on you. If you want their attention on other things, then they're going to drift. And they're not on task when they're drifting. And it's hard enough for them to stay on task if you're good. It's impossible if you're not, because that's when they start looking at those other things. And when I used to tease my classes, I used to say, so tell me, oh God, I forgot what his name was already. He's way dead, but I forgot. Jackie, whatever his name was, that was the name of the teacher, his first name, of the science teacher, who was renowned to be boring as hell. And I would say, tell me, did you guys explore all of these things during class in science? And they would laugh and they go, no. I go, well, when would you look at them? When would you have time to come before school and look at them? No. Before class, I mean, no. When did you look at him? We looked at him when he was boring, when he was going off track, when he was doing this, when he was doing that. That's when we looked at him. If in fact, yeah. Now, I'm not saying not to have things in your. It says it has a purpose. That slide. If it's to enhance instruction, that's the purpose, right? I used to have a guy, this is way sexist and this is way unwoke, but he would teach high school boys math, kids who had real difficult time in math. And his classroom was empty. Our principal said we had to go out and buy a ton of posters. And he bought this real sexist poster of a woman from the Bahamas. And he put it right behind him. And he used to say, they may not look at me, but they look toward me when I teach. And they look at these Bahamian travel posters. At least I know they're toward me. His message was kind of what we're talking about now, not with the content, but his message was, I'm trying to figure out a way to get them looking at me. And if I've got a lot of other stimuli in my room, they're going to look at that other stuff, especially when I'm boring. Okay, especially when I'm not doing well. So I'm not saying don't have things in your classroom that don't enhance instruction, that are part of instruction at other times. But I'm saying if you're watching them float, see what they're floating towards. And question yourself, what am I doing in my classroom right now with regard to instruction? If I'm teaching, if I have a disruptive kid in my classroom, not disruptive kiddos, but I have a disruptive kid, K-12, I have to be very aware of traffic patterns in my classroom. I have to be very aware of desks, how they're set up, what kinds of things I require students to do by getting out of chair, in chair. You know, do I require kids to hand their work in at the front of the room? And where does Joe Basilovich sit? In the back of the room? Am I nuts? If I have him sit in the back of the room, there's 5 kids that he's got a chance to club on the head as he's walking to hand his paper in, or to pull their hair, or to squeeze, do their ear, or whisper to them. I look at traffic patterns. As a teacher, if I have more than one disruptive kid in my classroom, I am making sure that I have visibility of all times of all kids. If I'm helping you, my body is going to be facing everybody if I possibly can. And the same thing for students. They should have the visibility as well. Simple, yeah? Yeah. That kind of takes away the I'm going to have my classrooms in going to have circles, the desks in circles and all this stuff. Because all of a sudden, if you have a disruptive classroom, if you have kids in your classroom who are disruptive, then it might be due to the opportunity that these kids have to mess around. Okay? And what we're trying to do is shorten the opportunities, lessen the opportunities. I just want to teach social studies. I don't want to, I want to teach. I don't want to think of these things. I'm letting you know, almost always I walk in and these were the things that we go to right away. And we find it. It's not brain science. Managing the classroom, managing time. Oh, I'm sorry. Eliani?
Thank you. I have a question about the seating order, the desks, because thinking about traffic patterns, but also like minimizing distractions, I would think that it would make the most sense to not have groups of desks, but every classroom that I have visited has groups of desks, and teachers have also told me that there are studies that say that it's conducive to learning, especially language learning, if you do seat the students in groups. Okay. So I wonder, what is your take on that?
My take is this. I always ask anyone who tells me what research shows, that sounds great. Can you share with me what some of that research? Okay. Because some of my favorite BS that we always do is we always say research shows. I always ask very nicely, oh, can you show me some of that research? That's really interesting to me. Because now, I'm going to be silly for a second. My daughters are dweebs, okay? They love school and they would never get in trouble and they would do great in groups because their key thing is I'm going to learn. So if there's no behavior issues in your classroom, you could do whatever you want almost. If it's such a high energy, the content is appropriate, they're learners, behavior problems are at a minimum. All you have to do is have a couple of simple rules to stop that. Then all bets are off. You could do, if research shows that grouping them together enhances language, that's fabulous. If it's also people acting nasty to each other and getting into arguments and getting into fights, well, what trumps bad word? What's more than the other? What counts more than the other, right? So you have to make sure that you're attuned to that before you make the choice. It's not all one or the other. It's what's first, and it's always behavior first because you will not be able to learn if behavior is inappropriate. 5th grade. I don't know if any of you are going to be teaching 5th grade, but 5th grade is when 4th, 5th grade is when a particular gender starts having real difficulties with each other. Okay. And I had teachers who told me what they do is they change the seating arrangement every week, so that cliques don't start, so that fights don't occur, so that people aren't nasty to each other. And if they are, there's not a familiarity. She said that is the one thing that works for them. Okay. Because in this particular school, there was a lot of a lot of cliques, a lot of, mean this and not mean that, and fighting and just craziness that prevents learning. And she had it right away. She said, I just switch them, man. I just turn them around. And I don't do it when they misbehave. I do it every week. Why? Because I don't want them to feel like they're being punished. I don't want them to, this is not a punishment. This is the way I like to teach. I like to see different faces and different desks. True? Nah, it wasn't true. She was doing it for management. But she's not going to tell them that. Why? And it was effective. It was effective. And almost always the teachers know what they're doing the best way. Schedules and routines, depending on what grade that you're in, that syllabus rules. I'm sure you feel most comfortable when you know what the syllabus is, what the expectations you have for your class. Kids are the same way. Routines are critical. Younger they are, the more critical they are. When do we do this? When do we do that? This class, I violate one of my most important routines. I always teach bell to bell. When the class starts, I teach. If you notice, when class is over, I teach. Why? Because I don't want you getting ready to leave before I'm done. Because we get ready to leave mentally, right? I don't want you to stop teaching in May if school's over June 1st. There's not just because of the education that's lost, but because students also check out, and they tend to get into more trouble. Suspensions and expulsions are at their peak during April and May and June. And it's not because they're tired of school, it's because we're tired of teaching in some cases. And we don't do the same kind of quality lessons that we did in September and October and November. And some of us are checking out. Some of us are actually writing on our boards 18 more days to school. Is there a message? Could you just imagine going to your doctor and the doctor has on a board right next to you as you walk into the office, 10 more minutes and you're out of here. Oh, I'd love to see that, doctor. Can't wait till you're done. Or I'm going on vacation and at 15 minutes. What's your problem? What do you want to do? And I've had teachers who put that message on boards. And they say, well, the kids like it. Kids already know how many days are left. What message are we sending? There's not another service group of people that I know that would put their end date on a board for all to see. Why do we do it? Because our teachers did it. It doesn't make it right. Our teachers do a whole lot of silly things. Vacations. If you're teaching elementary school, don't even tell them vacations are coming because they're going to be so excited already that you're going to lose them the 3 days beforehand. Okay? And if you have a party, those are the worst. Because parties, the kids that you really want to go to those parties, especially if they have emotional problems, they're going to be so excited that they'll never enter that party because they're going to get into trouble because they're so excited. They're going to get into trouble before the party starts. And they're going to end up sitting out in the hall or someplace. Because they're so excited they can't contain it. Okay? So the kids we want to attend the most of us, don't get a chance to participate. Manage it. Just let them know what's going on when it's going. And there's a comfort for that. When I said about structure earlier, this is part of that structure, but it's just letting them know what's going on. You might have somebody in your life who tells you their schedule like every day. Here's what we're doing tomorrow. Here's what we're doing in the afternoon. And they do it either because they think you need it or they do it because that gives them a comfort. What time are you getting up in the morning? What time are you going to work? What time are you going to school? What time are you doing? And you go, what do you care? I care because there's a sense to that for me. So you manage that time for classroom management. Cognitive instruction. We match students Cognitive development with academics. I wish we could spend some time on this later, more when we deal with academics. For kids with mild disabilities, like mild cognitive disabilities, mild emotional disabilities, mild learning disabilities, the biggest problem we have is matching content with cognitive development with skills. 3 different things. You know? Content, how am I going to make this interesting? How am I going to make this interesting? How am I going to make this interesting to you? Cognitive ability. Do you have the ability to understand it? Do I need to check more for understanding? Skills. Can you apply it? Can it make sense to you? Can you read it? Can you read for understanding? Do you have, even though you might be bright enough, do you have the academic skills necessary to carry it off? Because if you don't, I'm going to need to prepare myself for inappropriate behavior in my classroom. If my instruction level is higher than your understanding level and your skill level, I have to prepare myself for what I'm going to do with you when you're off task. I'm going to have to figure out, is it going to be okay if she puts her head on her shoulder, on her shoulders, on her desk? Because the idiocy is she's telling you, I can't learn this, or this is boring, or I don't get it. And you're saying, I don't care. Look at me anyway. Who's crazy? Who's nuts? Do we know how to teach kids differently? We're going to speak more to that. We touched upon it a few weeks ago. My favorite research study of all time, the more instructional time you have, the less time they're off task. With my intellectual duh afterwards. No kidding, Gunga Din. If they're on task, they can't be off task. Almost impossible, right? We teach skills and content. We teach thematic units. We try to make this fun and interesting. We try to bring it all together. Depending on the kind of classroom that you're teaching, you're going to be art teachers, some of you. A large number of you are going to be art teachers. I think 9 out of this class of 33, 34. What's the theme of the art that are you going to teach a skill? Are you going to teach history? Is there a way to teach content? Is there a way to work with some of the teachers that are in your school right now and say, how can we create, the skills that I want to make sure our students have and what you're doing in class to make it make more sense to them? If I'm teaching in elementary school, which I don't think they have art teachers anymore, no, whatever. If I'm teaching in an elementary school and they're doing, American history, can we do dioramas? Can we do sculpture? Can we do different kinds of things to reflect history? What kinds of things can I do to bring art to their world? Make it more interesting to them rather than saying, today we're going to, make a sculpture out of 10,000 toothpicks, which I failed miserably in, by the way. Still have a nightmare about that Elmer's glue and toothpicks. Naomi?
I just wanted to say that luckily within our other courses, our visual arts course has been exploring how to combine literacy and art making. And so it's fun that you brought that up because art integration is something that CPS has been pushing for the last couple of years, as well as putting in ELA standards with visual arts making standards, etc. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out too, that it's definitely something that we all talk about a lot as well.
And it's interesting, traditionally, this has been done as after school programs, not in school programs. We take a look at God, I forgot the name of it. True something or other is this program that's been in Chicago for years. And it basically is this wonderful arts integration program, but it's after school. So as opposed to, why is this separate from what we're doing in school? Why do we have to make art different? Why do we have to make music different? Why do we have to do the kinds of things that we do and separate it out? Why can't we get why does it have to be, arts and or whatever? What are they? I'm sorry. What's that great word I love that we have for things that aren't academic? What do we call the area that's arts and it's not arts and crafts, but it's
Like just content areas?
well, there's content areas and then there's everybody else. And there's a pecking order with everybody else. You know what I'm saying? So why can't we integrate that as well? And as I said to you, I referred last week or the week before, in special ed, we tend to throw our kids into your rooms. We give them the academics and they say, well, they could do art, they could do music. Why not? Because, they may not be able to read. There's not that pressure and stress there. Well, there's absolutely the pressure and stress there because they can't read and write math, it doesn't mean they could do art or athletics or anything else. It's idiot. The thought process is demeaning, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we bring it together. Have some fun. Not all behavior problems are behavior problems. Sometimes I just made this one up today, by the way. I'm very proud of myself. So sometimes behavior is an instructional mismatch. What I'm teaching is not getting in the way I'm teaching it. Right? Sometimes they don't get it. They can't do it. They understand it, but they don't have the skill necessary to communicate what they understand to you. Some of you have that. Some of you don't write well, but you could tell me what you know. Some of you don't write well, but you could be able to test really well what you know. Right? Some of you write beautifully and don't talk. Some of you write beautifully and don't show. But I'm requiring that you do whatever. So you don't have that skill that's necessary to let me know what you know. Right? And by the way, I'm a teacher. I don't teach those skills. I'm a language teacher. I'm an art teacher. I don't teach those skills. That's a special ed teacher's job or the elementary ed teacher's job or secondary teacher. Well, if you want to know that what you're teaching is being taught and learned, you gotta figure out a way to access that information. Because once you access that information, then and only then can you get what you want. If I know that Kendall knows something but can't write it, but I know she knows it, it's going to be a whole lot easier for me to have her write it. I'll have to do it in a different way than I'm doing it because I'm not getting it that way. All right? If I know that you know by the fact that you're acing these tests, but you can't tell me, but I know you know it, but the world out there wants you to know it that way, I've done half a job unless I could teach you how to tell you that information the way the world wants you to know it. And that's why these idiots who did these standardized tests for the last 20 years, thinking that measures education, that only measures education for those who can take standardized tests. That's one output. So they've defined learning by standardized tests. Are we idiots? That's what learning is? Not anywhere in the world. You go to any profession, they're not going to say, okay, well, to put you in, let's see what law, I'm a law school. Take the standardized test before I decide what you're going to do in this work. We don't do that. Nor do we put you in the hardest cases first, by the way. And sometimes behavior, regulation need, meaning sometimes it's on the kid. Sometimes there's skills that I don't have. I can't regulate myself in the classroom. I'll get to that in a minute. So sometimes we really do need, if you've read this stuff already, I fear that you haven't yet, we really do need functional behavioral analysis. We really do need to understand why behavior is being exhibited? What's in it for the kid to behave that particular way? That's the function of behavior. We'll get to that in a few seconds. So, still on that regulation. Does he know how to do the task? Does he have the skills necessary to handle a situation? Is he regulated enough to handle a situation? And I'll get that in a minute to you. Do I need more data? Maybe I just don't know. Maybe I just don't have enough information. Your principal's going to say, well, why do you do that? I don't know. He's in your classroom all the time. Yeah, but I never did this kind of a lesson with him before. I don't know. I don't know what's going on at home. I don't know. Does he behave this way in other classes? You should be able to tell me that, Mr. or Ms. Principal, right? I don't have all the data I need. Remember pattern and rate and all that stuff that we did last week? Sure, you remember it fondly. Do I need more data? Data, we hate the word data. Do I need more information? I don't care what you use. Data only has 4 letters. One second, I just want to make sure I didn't do something wrong. I did, hold on. Okay, I lied to you. All right, I just switched it. In classroom terms, regulation means, is the kid within this range of classroom behavior? For the most part, can the kid handle being in a classroom? If you identify, if you have 25 kids in your classroom, and you're going to say, okay, we're going to say that 22 of them can manage themselves. Can this kid fit within that range? Or is he on the 3 that can't, or the 4 that can't? Or are there certain kinds of things that he can't do that elevates his inability to regulate? You know, I notice every time we do this is he blows off the handle, whatever that means. He gets aggravated, you know, he starts getting goofy. I notice whenever we do this, I notice whenever I call on him, have you ever tried letting him know you're going to call on him? You ever said to him, you know, Blake, and I'm going to ask you this question when we get back from break. I'm going to ask you what this and this and this is. You ever set him up in a positive way? I'm going to ask you this question, Mary, later on. Think about it. You'll be stunned. Now, that may be all they're going to think about during the next 5 minutes, which kind of blows off what you're doing as a lesson, but it can be very effective at times. Take the kid out in the hallway. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you a question. The answer is 8. So if I say, you know, Andrea, what is it? 8. Good job, Andrea. Why? At least we know it's 8. And she's going to get classroom participation. And it's going to be easier for her. I'm not going to say wrong. Isn't that cheating? No. It's not going to get her into Yale. It's going to get her to answer the answer 8. Okay? It's okay to be nice. It's okay to get kids used to participating. The more times you say, good job, the more times they're going to participate, even you. I was teaching a student teaching seminar years ago, and I was talking about the importance of praise. And this guy said, a secondary ed teacher said, that's crap. These kids should know why they're there, and praise should not influence them on any level. And I said, Bob, what a great answer. I said, you know, I've thought about that myself, and I think that answer is unbelievable. I'm going to use that in the future. Without it, you know, most everybody got it. I said, within 6 seconds, I said, does anyone know the answer to this? And Bob raised his hand. And Bob gave another good answer. And I said, so why'd you start participating all of a sudden, Bob? Because it's okay to be right. That positive reinforcement does impact. You know? Can the kid control his impulses? and reactions. Or are there times when he can't or she can't? How fast can they recover from stress and frustration? That's a biggie. How fast can they reset? How fast can you reset? Because if you can't reset fast, students, teachers, then you better know it so that you give yourself time to reset in the classroom. You don't go off into your desk. You create a lesson which is going to give you enough time to reset, to get yourself together, to get your color back from red to whatever color it was beforehand. If red is your color of choice for stress. Whatever your color of stress is, or your pulse or whatever. How long does it take you to get back down? It's a lot easier for you to be a great teacher if you know that, you lessen it, and you go back to your lesson than for you to try to fight through it. You should have a lesson in your head right now when you're teaching this thing. You should say, okay, class, this is when you've lost it. Here's what we're going to do right now. And you give them a 5-minute work assignment, seat assignment, group assignment that you know is not going to be troublesome. And you get yourself together. It's okay. That time will dissipate. That time will lessen as you become more experienced as a teacher. The more times you face this stuff, trust me, the easier it gets. Except for when you keep failing because you're doing the same thing wrong every time. Because you're not paying attention to your body. You're not paying attention to these things. Then it's just going to cycle and cycle and cycle and escalate. By the way, not a bad thing when you're living, if you have a personal life as well, or you have children, or you have, I think that counts as personal life as well. Can the students adjust behavior based on the expectations? This is really critical, especially for those of you that we working with elementary ed students, and especially for those of you in art classes. Why? Because your setup is different than the regular classroom. Your setup is different than a special ed classroom. There is less structure for most art environments. Have you taught them to adjust to that? Or is that too difficult for them? What's going to be different about this classroom? Am I going to be able to see everybody? Everybody's going to be in my sight when I teach. The word I was looking for was specials. That's what we used to call art and everything. We used to say it's either academics or specials. For some of these kids, specials was not special because they had a difficult time navigating those courses as well. As you sit here, do you have any thoughts about how this fits with the experiences that you're having right now? Questions that you might have navigating it? Kiddos that you might be working with that you say, wow, I wonder how this is flipping. Your participation forums have been excellent on this, and some of you have sent me notes on the side to expand on it. I'm glad that it's at least working with some of your settings. Deborah?
So I am in a special ed school for now, and I'm also doing my pre-student teaching in James Adams right now. So basically, it's a marked classroom, and she has only 2 students who have IEPs, basically. The way she teaches math is quite different. Like, I've gone to math classrooms, but she just allows them to do whatever they like because it's 5th grade. I don't know. Well, she allows them to sit at the front and allows them to take notes whenever they're doing quizzes. But although classrooms I've been in, they are not allowed to sit at the front until activity time.
Mm-hmm.
You get, so she allows them to sit down at the front of the classroom to get what she's saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone has their own management style, and the key is are the students attending? Are they paying attention? or they're on task. And it could be, to some of us, I walk into that room and I think, wow, this is chaos. And then you look around and they're all on task. Well, that's not chaos. That's controlled chaos, you know? Others, they're sitting down and really working because they're all separate and they're all individual and all doing their stuff. Or there's a table in the back and they're working in small groups that way. And the teacher's calling them off and the SEEKA's calling them off. And, you know, we actually have students running it in some respect, in some cases. So it depends. I think I did this right. Yeah, okay. So the FBA is part of what we look at in special ed, and it's a functional behavioral analysis. And it sounds a lot more technical than it really is. We're looking really at when a behavior occurs, where and why we think it occurs. Okay. And what's the word I want to use? The easy way I think about functional behavioral analysis is, what's the kid getting out of the behavior? Why is the kid doing what the kid's doing? What's the function of it? Is there a clear function of it? So when you think of it that way, I think you tend to blame the kid less. You know, something you might blame him more, but yeah, I think you tend to blame the kid less. Meaning, he's doing this because, and we look at that other stuff earlier, because he doesn't have the skills to do it. So he's going to get thrown out of class because he doesn't want to be humiliated when you call on him. He's going to get thrown out of class because he doesn't want to get humiliated when you call on him because of your affect with him. Because the one thing he fears or she fears is your sarcastic remark when he doesn't know something. Or you're making light of it when the kid doesn't get light. The kid doesn't get humor when the kid's not doing well. When there's humiliation as part of it. So what I have to do as a kidda is to defend myself by striking back at you verbally. Why, when, where? And many times it's just to get out of a situation, not necessarily physically, but you know, emotionally, cognitively. So a well-regulated student can take turns, handle correction without escalating. These are, again, we're reinforcing concepts from earlier. Return to task after frustration. So when you tell me with Joe, for example, from last week, when you tell me when you're doing a kid on your next case study, when I give you a choice of case studies, question is, what have you set up? What are you thinking about for next year to work with your future classroom and kids who may not be able to do this? So when I give you the characteristics of the students, how are you going to handle that? How are you going to manage that? I need you to understand one thing that's really important on this, and that is, we're not talking about these aren't behavioral interventions. Okay? These are not things we do with EBD kids. These are classroom interventions. These are things that are going to help you become a good teacher. If you manage these things, they call it classroom management for a reason. Many people understand it as behavioral. I hope you're getting this as, I'm doing things to prevent things from occurring. And if I do all these other kinds of things, I'm going to prevent them from occurring, inappropriate behaviors. And I'm going to keep kids really actively engaged. If anything, behavioral management is, how am I going to manage my instruction? How am I going to teach really well? How am I going to get from them what I really want to get from them? So a dysregulated student has, you know, these kinds of behaviors: fear of flight, shutting down, yelling, screaming, aggression, appears defiant, you know, things that are drawing attention to him or herself. Your reaction to these things is critical. Remember I said remain calm? Very frequently, if you remain calm and they're not disrupting others, you could wait a few minutes before you intervene. As long as they're not disrupting others, And you'd be stunned to know that students in your classroom, if you're managing that classroom well, are much more what's the word I want to use? They can handle much more than you can. A kid could be next to somebody having a tantrum and still working. And you know who's going to tease that kid and make fun of him? A kid who needs management himself. So if I had a kid who's like acting out and I have somebody making fun of him, let's say Monique is making fun of Mary, and on my screen they're next to each other. I would say Mary's having a tantrum and Monique says something. I would say, Monique, that's a war. If I have my rule system, Monique, that's a warning. Please pay attention to your work. And I'm not doing anything. She's doing it. That's another one. I'm managing the reactions to Mary, not to, because Monique is not paying attention right now and is not on task. Right? If you like puzzles, if you like solving things, this functional behavioral analysis is great. You know, by the way, you use it for instruction as well. But it's great because it helps you understand behavior. And the more years you're at this, the better you get at it. And unfortunately, you have to suffer through your first year or two to get better at it. That you're not going to be good at it your first year or two. And you should know that. And you should just know that the next time this happens, this is what you'll do. You know, this is how you have to practice that. There's no shame to that, you know, unless you put it on yourself. Again, when, where, why, okay? It's all about planning, folks. If you thought being a good teacher isn't about planning, you are absolutely in the wrong gig. It is totally about planning. If you're going to be effective, is understanding what might happen. You got a kid who disrupts, I'll bet you 20 cents that on Monday, you'll know what the kid's going to do on Monday morning. Plan for it. Don't be surprised when it happens because you already know it's going to happen. I always, when a teacher says, I can't believe he did that. Oh, I bet you could. I bet you could believe it. In fact, I not only bet you believe it, if I said to you, what's he going to do Monday? I bet you'd tell me. Is he going to be calm, cool, collected? Is he going to say, oh, good, let's get to work? What's he going to do on Monday? This kid is causing you trouble. So stop acting surprised when he does it. Be prepared. Go in a different direction. Create a strategy. That's what's fun about this. And it might also be medical. And if it's medical, you've got to work closely with, a doctor or an IEP group, however that's designed. And it could be anything with regard to, some of these things are things that are caused by normal development. Some of these things are caused by people with intense physical disabilities. I mean, there's a whole lot of different kinds of groups of this. Many of these things are normal, they're occurring. On occasion, what's the reaction? And not everybody reacts in the same way. You just have to be prepared for it. No humor to that, just a plan. So when I say I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to know exactly what the behavior is. I'm going to fill that behavior out so that anybody off the street will know exactly what Matt's doing. Will know exactly what Kyla's doing. All right? They'll know it. They'll be able to describe it to me. They'll be able to walk into a room and say, that's Matt, that's Kyla. Because they'll see what that behavior is. That's how descriptive you're going to be when you start thinking about that behavior. Because the more descriptive, topography was the word we used last week, the more descriptive you are going to be about that behavior, the better you're going to be able to communicate that to whomever you need to, whether it be the school psychologist, whether that might be a special ed teacher, whether that might be ChatGPT. Make sure you do it a million times to get great references. Whoever that's going to be, just make sure you don't put it in as your own during our work, but still use it as a resource. That's okay. Great resources. Lesson plans, great resources. I want to taste that behavior. You know, I don't want to be, I want to know that you know. And I want to know if they occur with other behaviors. Again, do I repeat things? Yes. Events, times, and situations that predict when the challenging behaviors will and will not occur. A good functional behavioral analysis will be able to predict when a behavior is going to occur. Can't always. If a person has a disability, an emotional behavioral disorder, a disability, you might be able to predict it at times, but there are going to be times when you can't predict. You can't predict if you have depression in here or you know somebody who does. You can't. Things could be going great and you could have depression. You could go through a week of everything wonderful and be on the bottom tonight. So there's no prediction because it's a chemical issue, okay? It's a biochemical issue. But it very frequently can be predicted in classrooms, you know, what kinds of things that we're doing. And that allows you to plan out how you're going to meet it. If a kid needs attention, you're going to give the kid attention. If a kid needs this, you're going to try to do that for this. If a kid can't work out a task for more than 5 minutes, don't give them tasks for more than 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Or you can't have it both ways. If a kid can't do something, you can't ask them to do something more than that. Yeah. You're either going to teach them how to go 6 minutes by incentives, by whatever fabulous thing you guys have worked out with your special ed teacher or your school psychologist or whatever. You're going to try to teach them go longer, but if the kid can't do it, well, you got yourself a problem, folks. You got to figure out a way to take your 50-minute classroom and make it into 10 chunks of 5. And if you don't, the kid's going to cause trouble. So what do you do after 5 minutes? Anyone got an idea? You've been teaching for a whole whatever. What do you do? I'm on a 5-minute chunk. Let's pretend I'm a 10-minute chunk. I'll make it easier for you. I can only learn at 10 minutes at a time after that. And you're teaching kids for 15, 20 minutes, minimal that they're on these chunks. What are you going to do with a kid who cannot do more than 10 minutes? What's one thing you can do? Whatever you're teaching, I don't care. Jonathan, then Andrea.
And so for our teachers, you can start going through student work and like without showing the name and just be like hold them up and be like, this is good, this is not good, or this is what needs to be worked on, and then like see if people have some comments.
Okay, I may not have asked this question the best way I possibly could have. What I want to know is, let's say it's me, and you're teaching me, what's your favorite subject to teach, Jonathan? And pass if you want. What's your favorite subject to teach?
Art.
Art. And what give me an art lesson that we could do that you're going to do tomorrow, if you are, pretending tomorrow's tomorrow.
Self-portraits.
Okay, I'm going to do a self-portrait. And you're going to probably start off by teaching me how to do a self-portrait, right?
Sure.
I'm guessing, I have no idea what we're talking about. So we're going to do that, right? How long does that take?
I'm
instruction.
estimating around the intro instruction or them making it.
Both.
I'm gonna say 50 minutes.
50 minutes. Okay. So when you prepare the lesson, you have your students all in front of you, I'm guessing, of some sort, right? And then what's the first chunk of time? How do you teach that chunk?
Intro, give them some sort of engaging hook, then talk about it, then get them started, all of which should, like, they should be drawing in maybe 10 minutes.
Okay, so good for me because I could only pay attention for 10 minutes. I'm a happy boy. Okay, so now I'm doing 10 minutes with you. Now you have how many students in your classroom? Let's make them 20.
36.
36. Wow. Okay. So now we got 36 with me in your classroom. Aren't you lucky? You have 36, you got me in your classroom, and you're just what, walking around helping people, figuring out how they look? Or how to apply the 10 minutes of skills you gave them?
Getting them settled in and then hopefully answering some questions.
What are you gonna do with me after 10 minutes? More. What are you gonna do with
Um,
me? What are you gonna do with me at minute 20?
get you maybe a mirror. Maybe you can play around with the mirror for a few minutes. Then after the mirror, I don't know.
Okay, well, no, that's cool.
Trace
So
it.
you're gonna say to me, you're gonna make sure that after 10 minutes, I'm doing something else. Or you've got and hear me, folks. Okay, that's good. And you just have to think of that. It's not crazy land. It's not brain surgery. You just have to think, okay, I got this kid. And by the way, do I have another kid or two that might be in the same boat? Why don't I have them next to each other or near each other, and I'll have them both do the mirror. Okay? You got this. You got this unless you ignore it. And if you ignore it, you're going to go, Paul, put yourself down. Paul, start looking at yourself in the, Paul, I'm not doing it. I swear to God, I'm paying attention. No, you're not paying attention. And everyone wants to listen to you give me this talk, don't they? So you're going to be trying to get me on board, and you lose me and you lose the class. Andrea?
Well, the way I've been teaching, because I was teaching about street art
Okay.
recently, is gamifying a lot of the lectures, just because a lot of my students do struggle to work through long lectures,
Okay.
and instead of hearing me talk all the time, I want them to be able to engage with each other and try to look for the answers within themselves. So I propose like base factual information about street art, and then I had them look for the answers about this information that I gave them through a scavenger hunt as groups to kind of break down the information a bit in a much more simpler form.
Okay.
Um,
So how long does that take? So
that
you're going to
was
sit me
about,
down. We're going to do this. And what happens? Run me through
uh,
it.
so it was about a 10-minute basic facts lecture,
Hmm.
and the rest of the time was about 25 minutes of them kind of going through this scavenger hunt of looking for information. And then the last minutes of class were debriefing as a
Okay.
class and seeing what information stuck and what information needed to be retold the next day.
So what are you going to do with me, Andrea, that after 10 minutes of playing this game, you lost me? I'm done.
Hmm.
What happens to me?
There was also an optional, like I have a lot of students that finish early. Then there is a second assignment where the students got to explore like a video
Okay.
on
Well,
street art as well as a website.
good. I think what we need to think about, okay, when we do this, is not take me off task, keep me on task, but you've got to break up that task now instead of 20 minutes. What you've got to do is figure out something for me to do after 10 minutes, and then I'll be able to go back to that thing that you're doing for the other 10 minutes instead of saying, Paul, you have got no attention span after 10 minutes. I want you to do a video now. You're going to say, Paul, maybe I need, um, how's this? Paul, tell me what's going on so far. Give me a second. Where are we right now? or you might take that group and say, okay, we're going to stop right now after 10 minutes, summarize where we are, where we're going. Now, this might go longer than you want now because of this, but you're meeting the kid's need. You're breaking it up for that kid because he can only work in 10-minute chunks. All right. That's not the way I want things to go because I want them to learn this and this is only a 25-minute lesson. Well, guess what? You're going to waste less time with me because you're going to do that and you're going to get it done as opposed to if I start tantruming later because I can't do your work or I start misbehaving and I start making fun and making everybody laugh and we're never going to get this work done anyway, then you'll get it done in a different way. So you have to change the way you're managing your classroom. All right. What's my needs? How do I teach it? All right. And one more, Matt.
We have a couple students who are like, I don't know, they just can't focus. After, like you're saying, after 10 minutes, we give them a job. Sometimes we'll have them like pass out papers, like
Yeah.
we get through the agenda, the lesson objective, what we're doing today, a little bit of like examples, and then we'll be like, can I have you pass out papers?
Good.
Change the scenery for a second.
That works beautifully. And in fact, what's really crazy is that's only historically, who do we give those jobs to? Dweebs. We give it to the good kids. We don't give it to the kids who are who would most likely get in trouble. They'd be the least likely kid to be able to do that. And what you're doing is you're changing the structure around. You say, okay, you're part of this classroom. Do this stuff for me. Good. Oh, Deborah, you got one?
Yeah, sorry about my speaker. I wasn't able to hear you when you called me. Okay, the first thing I do once my students start losing concentration is to do a game concerning the tasks I'm doing today. For example, what if I'm doing a science lesson, right? I can tell them to do like a science game, Kahoot or something. It's basically fun. It keeps them, and their mind and dies and basically just answer the questions after the Kahoot lesson. So yes, I do that.
Great. And again, as long we're getting feedback in yours, so we'll try. As long as we're making sure that the lesson is the content being taught is critical to the content that you want the students to learn. We don't divert from what we're trying to teach that day. If I'm teaching street art, at the end of about 40 minutes, I want every student in my classroom to get street art. I don't want to do baby work for the kids who have the behavior problems. Or can't read or can't do it. If I'm doing self-portrait, if I'm doing the Boston Tea Party, whatever I am doing, and I know this kid now, I could predict what this kid's going to do. I got to do extra work. I got to figure out a way to get this kid engaged in what we're doing. All right. And wrap my lesson around it, because otherwise it's going to kill my hour, because I'm going to spend more time with this kid. Or I'm going to punish him for having this disability or having this learning problem, and I'm going to figure out a way to avoid it altogether. I'll give him some, sit him at the computer and let him waste his time there on a test that's got nothing to do with street art or self-portraits or Boston Tea Party. Why am I doing that? Because it's a whole lot easier than having to deal with them, which is the highest form of handicapism as far as I'm concerned. It's punishing kids for their disability. And that's why they don't learn stuff. They don't get it. What I tried to do today thus far is to present to you at least an introduction to what classroom management is and how to set it up in your classrooms, where you're going to be going. Take a look at what you're doing right now for the observation that you're in. That's one of the purposes of it. Those of you who are in student teaching, what's working in that classroom, how closely aligned to that stuff. Are kids being left behind in your classes? Are kids not being taught because of their behavior? Can you predict what their behavior is going to be? Are there certain times of the day they're going to do that? Can you just have some, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but have some fun and apply some of this stuff and see where it fits for your setting that you're in? Can you be able to predict what's going on the next time? Because you'll be able to do it yourself. By the way, somebody will be doing it to you in 5 years. So you want to make sure that you're prepared to understand where that stuff is going. This will allow you to do the thing that you love the most, and that's teach content. Whatever content you're going to end up teaching, whether you're going to teach Spanish or you're going to teach German or you're going to teach art or you're going to teach visual arts, you're going to teach whatever kinds of things that you teach in here, you know? Social studies, third grade. You can't let this get in the way. This should enhance what you're teaching is going to be about. Okay. And you'll have people take care of each other too. That's a different thing we just don't have the time and energy in this room right now in this kind of an intro class to do that. A couple of you put on your post, or wish we had interventions for this and interventions for that. This is like a survey class. I'm already giving you more interventions than I'm supposed to. But if you want interventions, drop me a note. Okay, I mean, I am reading them on the post as well as on your participation form. But if you really would like some specific interventions to do the kinds of things that we're talking about, drop me a note, and if I have them at my ready, I'll be very, very happy to reference them to you because they're out there. They're out there. You won't be able to use them, obviously, to have your own setting most often, but there are subtle things that you can do in your classroom that won't get in the way of your relationship with your teacher that you're working with. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, there's things you could do right away. Let me ask you a question before we head out. Do any of you are any of you taking 471 in next quarter? The student teaching something rather? No. Okay, good. I don't mean that in a bad way because, all right, let me share with you something. How do you give, everyone knows it's important to give positive reinforcement, right? What is positive reinforcement? Taylor, what's positive reinforcement?
Basically, I feel like for the word that's coming to mind is reward, but it's not always like a tangible reward, but some kind of reward for something that someone's doing well.
That is very good example of a positive reinforcement. Good. Grace, what's positive reinforcement?
Positive reinforcement is, I feel like it was said really well, like a reward, for doing something correctly, or doing the right thing. Yeah.
What could that reward, what does reward mean? Help me out.
I guess reward could be like just like a good job. In my classroom, sometimes we give them like trophies if they come in and sit down quietly. Could be a lot of different things, I think.
Okay. Can you give me positive reinforcement right now?
Um, yeah, I, um, uh, I think that I like the guy on the slideshow, the image that you have on the slideshow. You're doing a nice job including images.
Thank you.
Yes.
Monique, give me positive reinforcement. How needy could I be, right? To ask everybody, give me positive reinforcement.
You're doing a great job giving us instruction.
Thank you. Kendall, give me positive reinforcement. I'm going to ask others, so be ready.
You're providing multiple avenues to consume the content.
Okay. So what are the components of positive reinforcement that we've heard thus far? Elizabeth, give me one of the components.
Praise for their work that they're doing. It could also be praise for their behavior and focus.
So what the one component was positive, right? Praise. Okay. Is there another component? Blake.
Um, I mean, there's probably several. I think that you have to understand what motivates somebody. I think it's pretty individualized. Just praising somebody verbally might not work. Giving them candy might not work. I think you have
Okay.
to understand the individual student and what drives them.
Okay, but my question is, of the of the examples that we've heard thus far, they all carry four characteristics, four pieces. Of the four that we've heard thus far, I've heard four pieces of praise. One is positive, right? Think of what people said. It could be anything that people said. What was another thing that they said that came out of Naomi? One thing.
It all happens in real time.
It's immediate.
Yes.
It's immediate. Very, very good. You got that right. So it's you use the word immediate. Immediate is one of the areas that is part of praise. So I see a part of positive reinforcement. I heard two things. I'm going to tell you there's only two left. Lindsay, what's another component?
I was gonna say it should be repetitive and it should not be based on bribery.
Okay. Well, I've always said you can never bribe somebody for doing it right, for doing a good thing. You only bribe people for doing bad things. So I agree with you totally. When I give somebody a reward for doing something right, that's not bribery, that's praise. So of the instances that I've heard, I want to know what did we see? If I had to write down the definition of positive reinforcement, positive feedback, I've heard two components. I've heard it's got to be positive. It also has to be immediate. There's two other pieces. Eliani, what do you got?
I want to say that it acknowledges something that it acknowledges something
Go
that's
a little,
positive.
go a little warmer. You're warm. Get hotter. It acknowledges something
That you did.
that's true. No. That's true. You acknowledge something that's true. Okay? So it's
Okay.
positive, specific. Oh, I just gave it to you. I'm a bad person. I'm a bad person. You could all take your hands down. It's positive, specific, immediate, and true. So when I praise, I said, good job. I said, yes, you answered, you said that word. It is immediate. So it's positive. And when I say positive, it's 100% positive. What that doesn't mean, that means is you can't say, boy, it took you 15 attempts, but you finally got it right. You feel good with that? Not as good as you would hear when you heard, good job. You answered specific correctly. Good job. You got that answer correctly. You answered positive feedback correctly. Positive, specific, immediate, true. For those of you that love acronyms, you mix those letters around and spit. Specific, positive, immediate, true. Okay? I cannot tell you how rarely I hear that. Good job is not positive feedback because it's not specific, immediate, and true. You're not teaching the kid what he did right. You're being vague. Good job, you got that answer correctly. Right? Good job, you raised your hand. How many times do you hear me say that in here? Appropriate hand raising behavior. Why? Because I know that some of you who don't do it that way are going to learn how to do it. That's one thing you could do tomorrow that you may not be doing today with your students. Record yourself without identifying students because you'll be stunned how little you give it. You think you get very positive? Record yourself. Let somebody know you're doing it. I'm only doing this to record how many times I give positive feedback. You'll be stunned how little you give it. I give it all the time. You might give good job all the time, nice work all the time, you don't give positive feedback all the time. The most reinforcing of positive feedback. The second thing you could use tomorrow. If you see an inappropriate behavior occurring, you do ignore, attend, praise. Jonathan, turn off your radio. Ignore, attend, praise. Okay?
I do not have a radio on. I'm
That's,
just having a
I'm
good
kidding.
time.
Yeah. Ignore, attend, praise. Okay? Here's ignore, attend. Here's what I should have said. This is what ignore, attend, praise is. I ignore the behavior that's inappropriate for the setting. I attend to the appropriate behavior of somebody nearby. And then I praise the person who was behaving inappropriately if they do. Ignore, attend, praise. Instead of confronting Jonathan, like I did, I could have said, Kendall, Kendall, good job. Your eyes are on me and you're paying attention the way we've defined attention. If Jonathan says, oh, and then he starts looking at me and has his mouth closed, I would then turn around and I would say, Jonathan, nice job. You're paying attention to me. Your mouth is closed. Okay? He may or may not do that. It may not work. But what it's a lot less stressful then is drawing attention to the kid who's misbehaving by drawing the appropriate behavior by doing positive feedback to the person who is next to him or near them. You praise the kid. Ignore the inappropriate behavior. Attend to somebody behaving appropriately. Praise if the kid turns around and starts behaving. Wait, what does pay attention mean? When you say pay attention to somebody, Blake, what do you mean when you say pay attention to somebody? When you tell your class or tell a student to pay attention, what do you mean?
I'm just doing observation work right now. I haven't taught an entire class, but I think that you're just trying to refocus them towards the lesson and the content.
Okay, so if you tell Karime or if you tell Monique to pay attention, you're saying to them what? If you tell the class to pay attention, you're saying, if I'm them, what am I supposed to be doing?
Well, I mean, paying attention to me, I hate to put it like that, but like the lesson and the lesson plan and probably eliminating whatever distractions that they're, focusing on at that time. They're not supposed to be.
Okay. Richie, what do you mean when you tell a class or somebody to pay attention?
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, what do you mean when you say pay attention
Yeah,
to a
right.
student or class?
Yeah. Ironic. What do I mean when I say pay attention?
Yeah.
I don't know. I never really, I don't ever use that phrase. I mean, I ask for eyes and ears, those kinds of things.
What do you want to do with them? Those eyes and ears.
Well, I guess get information into them, right?
Okay.
So.
All right. You've never heard people say pay attention in class? Dylan, what do you mean when you say pay attention?
Okay.
Shift your focus back to me. That's what I get from paying attention.
What does that mean? How could you tell if I'm paying attention to you?
Active engagement.
Okay, what does that mean? Help me.
You're attentively listening to me. I see you. You're focused.
Okay.
We're here.
Okay.
That's what I get from paying attention.
All right. There's a lot there, isn't there? So, Joy, you going to say something?
No, Dylan already said it.
Okay. About 50% of what I heard, I could never tell if you were paying attention or not. Right? You could be watching a game on a screen near you. You could be listening to music. You could be doing anything. And I won't know if you're paying attention to me, unless there's a behavior that's specific to that. So like Dylan had threw a lot of things in there of which I can only identify. I can't tell if you're listening to me, right? Can you? I can't tell if you're listening. If pay attention means listen to me, I can't measure that. Look at me, I can measure. So my class has to understand that when I say pay attention, if I say just pay attention, it means look at me. If I say pay attention to your assignment, it means work on your assignment. There's always a part of that. Students have to be very clear about your instruction. Okay. And for you sitting here, you might say, well, most of my kids don't need this. You're damn right they don't. I don't care about most of your kids. I care about the kids who do need it. Okay. I care about the kids who are missing it and will get into trouble later on because they don't pay attention. And for kids who don't pay attention, I move them closer. For kids who have difficulty paying attention, I try to make sure that that's the behavior that we're looking at. And I go back and I might do the analysis on that. Positive feedback, ignore 10 praise, and finally one more, and then we'll go. Simple. Direct prompt. Please pay attention. Please look at me. Please start your work. Just a please, and then specifically tell the student what you want them to do. And if it's please pay attention to me, it's because it is understood in your classroom setting that pay attention means look at me. If it does not mean that, then there's not a way in the world that has any meaning to about 20% of the kids in your class. I am paying attention. I don't know if I told you, my oldest was one of those hand raisers, the ones in class that really are obnoxious. They raise their hands all the time and, call on me, and the teachers tend to avoid them. And she learned that the best way to get called on was to pretend she wasn't paying attention. So if she pretended she wasn't paying attention, the teacher would say, Brian, what's the answer to that? And my kid would go, 9. I finally got a way for Mrs. Johnson to pay attention to me. Pretend I'm not. All right. So with all of this, please, and then when they do it, you use praise. Thank you for looking at me. Thank you for starting your work. Why am I praising them? They're doing something they should have been doing. They're doing something everybody in the class is already doing. Why am I praising them? Because they weren't doing it before. And if you believe that praise reinforces and enhances the chances of that work happening again, then it might mean that they need that praise to get to work. Okay. Positive feedback, ignore 10 praise, direct prompt. 3 things you could do tomorrow if you're not doing it already. 3 simple things you could do with students that you're working with. Avoid, Richie, I need you to pay attention to me. You don't need anything. You'd like them to. Please pay attention to me. All right? When teachers say they have needs. Avoid when you tell students, you chose that behavior. They don't choose that behavior. They do it. Questions or thoughts? Thank you for your time. I'll stick here as long as you need me. What did I want to say about? Please pay careful attention on the participation, on the participation forum, that the purpose of those when we do Zoom is for you to present primarily the content that we discuss in class, that we cover in class, to be supplemented by the information that's in your readings, etc. Okay. I differentiate it during these weeks because I want to make sure that you're paying attention and getting content out of the class, at least on some level. So don't ignore, it's not a book assignment, it's a class assignment, discussion assignment, presentation assignment. That's supplemented by the materials that we have in class. All right. See you later, folks. Have a good evening. Take good care.
See ya.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.